Grab yourself some poster board for these yarn cone Christmas trees, and then grab some of this hard coat Mod Podge. This stuff means business and it works amazing with fabrics. Take your poster board and start spinning it so your top end is really teeny, and then the bottom's got a little bit of a wide bottom. And then you want to cut it as even as you possibly can. If you like to measure and do all that stuff, you go right ahead. I like to wing projects most of the time and just kind of eyeball it. Then I took my hot glue gun and just glued down the side. And people, hold that in place for a second because that sucker will spin right off if you don't. I did the same exact thing and just cut a smaller shape. So this way I had two different trees and they were different sizes. You can make as many of these as you want. Really just depends on how big the piece of poster board you have is. And look at how great these Christmas cone trees turned out. Aren't they amazing? That's going to be it for this first project. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. All right, back to business. You're going to need some yarn. Okay, I have some white yarn here and some brown yarn here. I figure let's keep it a little neutral. And then grab you a bowl and your hard coat Mod Podge. You could use regular Mod Podge. I've done that as well. I just feel like this stuff has some extra oomph in it. Plop you a little bit of water. It doesn't have to be a lot. Just makes it a little bit runnier so it seeps through your fabric. You don't have to get wild and put like a cup to tablespoon ratio or anything like that. I probably put about a tablespoon of water and then just mixed it till everything was nice and smooshed together. Finding the end of the yarn is always so much fun, especially after you dunk it in the Mod Podge because you're doing little dunky dunks. Now some people might just saturate it. I've done that before, but I learned the hard way that sometimes you just have too much Mod Podge and then it takes days and days and days and days to dry. And who has that kind of time, people? Because I don't. So a little dunky dunk, a little smooshy smoosh, and then we find our end again, and I spared y'all watching me dig for the end. As you can see, it's kind of spread out here on the bag. And then I put the end not all the way at the bottom because I wanted to be able to wrap and kind of cover that up so I knew it was tucked in there really well. And then just continued spinning the yarn up and down the tree until all of our poster board was completely covered. I did the same thing with our white yarn. I did a little dunky dunk in the Mod Podge, a little smooshy smoosh, and then I found our end and tucked it midway to the bottom and spun from the bottom all the way up and back down on the cone. Because I didn't oversaturate with the Mod Podge, I was able to take my heat gun and do a couple minutes of drying here and there. And after about 2 hours, they were completely ready to be displayed. I added a little wood star at the top of the white one, and I love how these turned out. Dollar Tree is the best place to go shopping for glass, especially when you want to create DIYs for any occasion. I picked these up for obviously $1.25 each, and we're going to just glue them together. Now you can use whatever kind of glue you want. I happen to have this on hand and it's one of my go-tos, and I just did the entire rim of this little candlestick here and then attached the little glass piece right to the top. I let these dry for about 3 hours before I came back in to do our little Mod Podge hack DIY to this. And honestly, I love how these look just like this. But hi, my name is Brandy and I can't leave things alone. So we're gonna need to get out some mica powder, some Mod Podge, and go to town on these joints. Did you know that if you mix mica powder and Mod Podge, it creates its own paint-like substance? I call it mica powder paint. I'm using this white, and there really isn't a ratio. So if you go asking Brandy how much, what do I got? About 2 tablespoons of Mod Podge here in each little plop. And definitely about a tablespoon of mica powder in that joint. for show. And I feel like I put about the same ratio right in our other little plop of Mod Podge here. Mix these up until you're happy with it. And then I personally, when I'm doing glass, like to use little sponges. And it doesn't matter if you're using like a makeup sponge, a little like, what are they called? The Dotten sponge. I'm drawing a blank here, people. Or little kitchen sponges even. I'll cut them up and use them as well. Just a sponge. And tappity tap 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 on the glass. For some odd reason that works better to me, and it's kind of a thicker substance, so it gives it a little bit of a texture as you're doing it. I personally feel like this color would look amazing on the whole thing. Now, people be mindful, this is going to take several layers. This is not a quick and easy craft. This is after 3 layers, and it's really pretty with 3 layers, but I did 5. And you can take the heat gun over it gingerly and, you know, try to speed up the heating, but it is going to take a little bit of time because each layer you want to dry a little bit. It's not really long of a dry time, but just make sure, you know, Mod Podge usually dries pretty quick, but just make sure your layers are dry before you start putting on another layer. I was going for an ombre effect here, which I have done before on this channel many times. I'm just taking the green and putting it all at the top and bringing it down to blend into the whites. And then in the center where they meet, I just kind of go back and forth over them, switching sponges till there isn't a defining line where you can see that it's green and up or white and down. They really just kind of mesh right into one another. These took about an hour to completely dry once I was finished my last layer. People, these are absolutely stunning. I could not have hoped for a better end result with the way that these pieces turned out. Let me know in the comments below if you're gonna try some mica powder paint on some glass this holiday season. Start off with this wood giant tree slice. I call it a wood giant tree slice, even though it says it's a wood sign, but it's more like a very thin slice of wood. And we're going to use 2 of these crates. Now, we're first going to just take our antique Waverly wax and we are going to stain everything. Using a baby wipe is probably the best method to apply this quickly and easily. I am actually out of baby wipes, so I'm just using a paper towel here. Now while that's drying, we're going to create a raised stencil. I'm using some DAP spackling here. My favorite is Joint Compound, but I can't get to it, and this was right over my head, so it's a little dry, okay? I was struggling to get its crustiness out of here, but we're gonna make it work by adding some white paint to this and some water, and just use a little bit of elbow grease until you have the consistency of smooth butter, and then pick out your stencil. I thought this one would go just perfect with the way that it just kind of lays when I turn it, you know, like a triangle and at the top of the tree, and then we're just going to patch it in as we go down. I did take a minute to kind of center our little crates and make sure that it wasn't going to overlap where we're going to put our spackling. And once I had that all marked up, I started applying our little mixture here. Now I have this little spatula thing because I get most of my craft supplies at Ross, and this just happens to come in one of the little paintbrush bundle things that I purchase. But don't hesitate to use a spoon. You got a plastic spoon laying around, use that joint. It will do the job just the same. I've been doing this for years at this point, and I tell you, it doesn't matter if you have crafty special tools. It is going to look like this no matter what, as long as you keep your stencil in place. And a little tip, if you want an extremely professional finish, make sure you're washing your stencil in between applications. As you can see here, there is a little bit of smudging. I'm going to show you how to fix that though. For crafters' sake, I like to call it, just to save some time, I may cut a corner or 2. Okay, please don't hate me. If I'm not reselling a piece, and I'm keeping it and I'm just kind of showing you guys inspiration, I have no problem doing that, but I like to be real with y'all and let you know, like, hey, I'm not washing this stencil every time. This is why it's bleeding, or this is why there's extra. And in case you guys do that, guess what? I'm going to show you how to fix it. Like right here. Wait until this is dry, and then you're going to take a tiny paintbrush with a little bit of your Antique Waverly wax, and you are just going to go over it. And boom, it is completely fixed, and it looks really, really nice. That is a good reason why you paint first or stain before you do a raised stencil like this, in the event that there is some bleed through. And even though you try to do as much as you can to prevent that, you can go back over it, and these little details will help fix those problems and give you that high-end looking finish. Here we are just addressing the dangly crusty bits that are hanging off the side of our tree slice. After this dries, it's pretty hard, so being able to kind of flicking one off there or scraping one off is super easy. Next, we're going to glue on our crates. Make sure you're using some wood glue for a long hold and some hot glue for the quick hold. And if you want some extra protection, don't be afraid to use a drill bit to put some screws in there and some little pieces in the back, so it really, really stays on for a long time. And these are just some little snowflake laser cutouts that I had, and I am putting different ones on the top of these trees. For staging purposes, I'm just using some stickies on the back for them to hang on the wall, but you could easily put some twine or some ribbon to add your hanger accents. These are absolutely my favorite Christmas DIY that I have made so far this year. Let's forget about Etsy and all the amazing things they have to offer on their website, but not today. Not today. People, we are going to be duping this beautiful painted piece from Etsy using some Dollar Tree wood hanging decor pieces. And we're going to need three to be exact. We will need 3 for this project, and some popsicle sticks. Let's not forget the popsicle sticks, because we have to make sure that the piece stays together. I just cut the tips off of them, mostly because I don't like the way they look. And if you're going to sell it, it's nice to know that if people turn it on the back, they don't see popsicle sticks just kind of holding their art together. I arranged these in a way so the holes weren't straight down one side. I don't really know what the madness was behind this, but in my mind, if people did notice there were holes, they weren't just right down one side. So I decided to take some painter's tape and plug up the holes on the back. So as we seal them in through the front, this will stop anything from oozing out. Then I grabbed some Gorilla Glue gel and put a couple little dollops on the back here, and then some hot glue and put in between. It's a good idea to try and not overlap your glue that is going to give you that long lasting hold with your hot glue, because it's a good chance that if you overlap them, they might cancel one or the other out. And if you're reselling pieces or giving them as gifts, or you want them to last for a long time in your home, you don't want the possibility of that glue coming apart. To fill up the holes, use whatever makes you feel fuzzy inside. I've used wood putty, spackling, caulking, joint compound, and today we're going to use some of Tim Holtz texture paste. At this point in my life, I feel like I've used this enough to know once it dries, it's going to make sure these holes are nice and plugged up. For the edges, I'm going to just take some Antique Waverly wax and a baby wipe and get a nice little brown tint around the edges. I'm going to pop a little picture of our dupe up here in the corner so you can see how beyond that gray paint, we do have some brown stain kind of showing through right around the edges. And that's all I'm trying to do here, is mimic that. So I'm not worried about filling in the whole thing with antique wax. Use whatever kind of paint you want. I like to use chalk paint and mix it with different acrylics. I find that if I take some chalk paint, I can really create different color variations with like one coat kind of coverage. And if you use just a little bit of water, you can also spread your paint out. Now, I wouldn't go spraying it in the bottle, but you know, we be bougie on a budget, people, so we gotta spread our craft supplies where we can. And I can for sure just like spraying this wood right here, little bit, couple little squirty squirts, and then smoosh our paint all around. And it really gives a nice coverage and allows us to blend different color paints in really well. I started with the lighter color here, and I'm just using a baby wipe to spread this around. and then I come in with the darker color. And you can see the lighter paint is still wet. It blends really good. If you can keep your surface wet, that's a little tip, you know what I mean? Keep it wet. Get your mind out of gutter, people. We're crafting, okay? Keep it wet. We're crafting. Paint. Okay, move on. The piece was blended really well together. However, in the picture, there are some really dark sections, and I wanted to create that without having it too blended. So I decided to take some of Antiques Waverly Wax with the dark paint I already had, just to tint it a smidge. And you'll notice that the paint is still wet on our piece. This is allowing the long strokes that I'm creating with the brush to blend in, but still pop enough that that darkness is going to really be bold on our piece. If you do this once your paint is completely dry, you will really be able to see paintbrush streaks. And you want to make sure you go the whole flow of the board so you don't have abrupt stops in your paint. A good rule of thumb is if you want your paint to flow, don't stop your brush in the middle of a project. Go all the way across and make sure it's a little wet, and it will still blend without leaving paintbrush strokes, stops, and streaks. For our tree, we're only going to need to use a fan brush, and you can use different colors of green to accomplish this. I did not make the tree look exactly like the tree in the picture because I think that is a difficult tree to paint if you're new to painting. And I know 1000% that using a fan brush to recreate a Christmas tree is the easiest way. So if you muck up, it is not a big deal. It is usually extremely easy to fix. I like to go in with my darker colors first. And for this, since I really want it to fill the center with darker colors and have some of that bolder dark green on the edges, I started with that bolder dark green first and kind of got the shape of the tree going. And all you do is put a little bit on the edge of your fan brush and just tap, 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 and just build it up. That's all we're doing here. And you can switch out different colored greens as you go along. When you're happy with how you have it built up, grab you some white paint and then just tappity tap 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 right on the edges. Be very ginger with this, people, and here's why I say that. You want to make sure that there's not a ton of white paint on the brush as you're going through and doing this throughout your tree, because then you'll have globs of white and it's going to be hard to create that branch looking effect like I'm doing here with the tree. As you can see, there's barely any paint on this fan brush. So me just doing a little tap, tap, tap in different sections, even in the center, it is giving the tree the appearance that the branches are going different ways. When you're happy how this looks and stay around the edges of the branches, you can come in how I am here with a couple little thick layers just to add for that snowfall effect, like something landed heavier in this section than it did on the rest of the tree. If you got a stencil, use the stencil. If you have a Cricut or stiletto, whatever that silhouette, stiletto, whatever machine you want to print you out a stencil, you go right ahead. I decided to just freehand this, mostly because to me it looked like whoever had painted this freehanded it as well. So I thought I was just going to do the same thing and give it my best go, and I wrote it how I felt comfortable writing it so it looked authentic and natural instead of just trying to mimic the way they had the words written. So let's take a real quick look at our Itsy piece that we are duping today, and now let's check mine out. To create our little rustic snowman, you're going to need a base. This I had in IKEA. Look perfect, and we're going to need 3 wood slices. Now each one is a little bit bigger than the next. Of course our head is the smallest. Once we have it all tiered properly, we're going to need to create a sturdy base for this to attach to, and I cut down a shim to accomplish that. And of course I'm trying to bust out the wood glue and it's all stuck in there, and I got lazy and just screwed off the lid, and it then poured out onto our wood slices. Don't be pretending like you guys don't get tired of pulling that sticky stuff out your wood glue. I know you do, okay? You're not alone. To make sure our shim stayed stuck on there immediately, I added a little bit of hot glue in the sections I didn't have any wood glue, and then let this dry for about 5 minutes before I carried on to our painting. I'm just using white chalk paint for this part, and I'm going to then come in to draw the face after this completely dries. I am taking a little bit of it and brushing around the edges of our wood as well, so it just all looks blended in. This is a little snowman I had left over from last year that I got from Walmart. The sucker was on it really well. I had one hell of a time getting this little hat off of here. Pulling one hat off of a snowman and put it on another snowman. For the face, I'm keeping it very simple. We are painting on our little orange nose. I kept the eyes in the shape of like an oval. And for the smile this time, instead of doing dots, I made like little squiggly lines. For his little scarf, I'm taking some Dollar Tree fabric that I have on hand, and I'm cutting it about 7 inches long, and we're going to just create that little dovetail effect at the very end of it, wrap it around his neck, glue it on him, and then we are going to glue our snowman onto our base, and that's going to be it for this little guy. Also use a 2x4 for this, but just to give you an idea to show you the size difference. For me, the most important thing was just making sure it could sit on its own, and the 1x4 worked. So I'm starting about 2.5 inches to kind of create like a crescent. I'm going to bring that up to about 3 inches, maybe a little over. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you're one of those people that need it to be perfect, then take your time and be mindful. You could use like a bowl to kind of give you more of a rounded edge. I was not stressing it. Now, the dupe we're creating is this adorable little hat. It's not going to be an exact dupe because I have my own vision, okay? I need to be creative through me. So to accomplish this, I clamped it down to my little workstation here and then took a jigsaw and just followed it on around. It's a little wonky, but I love it, and we're not going to really see that later. I did sand it down and use my Dixie Belle cotton to paint this, and we're going to take these Dollar Tree stencils and use this little snowflake one. I chopped up the little snowflake one just so I had like a strip, and then I'm measuring it to make sure it's centered. I was lucky enough that my painter's tape was exactly that width and created 3 sections on the little hat, and then used a tan khaki color by Apple Barrel to just paint in some stripes here. If you're worried about the bleed, use the same paint as your base or Mod Podge before you apply your different color. I wasn't stressing it because I like rustic looking type things, and just went back over right here with my paintbrush to just touch up some areas. Using a sponge, we're just going to gently tap on our stencil, and then we're going to add on this little laser cutout I purchased in a pack from Amazon. It's a little bell, and this would really look so cute with so many different little laser cutouts, but I just wanted to use the bells. You use whatever makes you fuzzy inside. Next, we are going to create our pom-pom, and I'm just taking some yarn I picked up from Walmart and wrapping it around my finger a few times, well, many times, and then taking another strand and tying it so that all of our pieces are wrapped together. I'm slicing all the loops so this way they're kind of like frayed bits, and then just trimming it up a little bit so it doesn't look like a hot mess. Adding a little bit of glue, and that's it for this one.
Last year I thought about how things can come around just like that if one day.
I'm a huge fan of book decor, and when I seen these, I thought decoupage deliciousness, and I had to create my own version, and I'm going to start using a 1x4. We are going to cut it at 5 inches. I cut a smaller one at 4 inches, so this way it sat on top, not exactly, but you know, in a little bit like a layered type of, you know, look. And then we're going to use our wood glue and our hot glue to attach these. I painted the book stack white, and once it was all dry, I picked up this napkin at Christmas tree shops and loved the little "'Tis the Season" saying to put on the side of the book, and thought the tree would look beautiful on the top of the book. But to my surprise, there was like no sneaky layers, so I had to rip the napkin apart. It was like that beautiful Charmin toilet paper, you know, that real nice fluffy stuff. Like that's what this napkin is made of, that luxury, you know, feeling of, okay, anyhow, you guys know where I'm going with this. Okay, there was no sneaky layer, and I just had to make do with it. All right, so I ripped it up, and then I used a decent amount of Mod Podge, more than I would usually use, to get these letters on here. And then I finished it off by putting even more Mod Podge over top of it, because it was a really thick napkin. Okay, I was shocked. I was so fancy. I couldn't believe how thick this napkin was. And of course, what inspired me to want to make the dupe for these books was they had like paper decoupaged on the top. So I wanted to put the tree on the top, of course, that went with the napkin. I thought it was very modern, very minimal looking, that just gave some extra on there. I trimmed down some burlap ribbon and then wrapped it just one time around the whole book piece and glued it to the back. And then took some more ribbon, different little pieces, some sparkly ribbon, some check ribbon, or however you want to, it looks like flannel to me all the time. I know people call it buffalo check or whatever, but it just reminds me of flannel t-shirt. Okay, I'm just going to address the elephant in the room. Of course, I have struggles with the stapler, so I like to staple them all together. It works better for me, and then I glue it onto my project. To finish it off, I take another little laser cutout, and that's going to be it for this one.
We have our ups and downs, but when there's love, there's always a way. And oh, this time of year, we come together to celebrate. Yes, every time the snow is falling down and it is cold outside.
Meet the item that really started and inspired me to make this whole wood video. I love the wood present idea. So taking this little 4x4, and it's about 3 1/4 inches ish, and I'm going to keep this neutral instead of painting it the red, the white, or the green. I thought, let's take a little bit of antique Waverly wax, add some water to it, let it dry, keep it really, you know, neutral and natural and simple, and add some white ribbon. I love this ribbon, but it is super messy. Glitter everywhere after this. I took some just plain white ribbon to go over it, just to kind of hold it in place, and then I did use a staple gun to make sure that it was stuck on there instead of just the glue, because in my experience, whenever I hot glue fabric to wood, it doesn't stay very long. So listen, I'm just being honest, okay? And before I hear any comments like these aren't exact dupes, no, they're not exact dupes. These are more of inspired dupes, okay? I wanted to create them for my home, and I just love the idea of a lot of these that are on Pinterest. This greenery I picked up from Walmart for 98 cents, and I'm just cutting it up and putting some on top here to add to the neutral aspect of it. I just love how this little present turned out. And that's going to be it for this one, people.
Last year I thought about how things can come around just like that if everyone is here to celebrate one day.
I had this spare piece of 4x4, and it's about 4.5 inches. If you want to add some buttons, make it a little bit longer. And I'm using Dixie Belle's cotton to paint this piece because I can get a 1-coat coverage and use my little heat gun on here. And this sucker was ready to go in like 20 minutes, and literally took me no time at all to make. It was fairly easy, and you know, if I'm saying it's easy, I mean that mess. I had some floral berry bit pieces, what I don't even know, from a stuff I purchased at Dollar Tree, and I thought we're gonna make this nose. I was gonna do clay or use ribbon or whatever. I was like, nope, I want something different, something unique looking, and kind of just messed around with these and glued them into a corn looking type nose, or not corn, carrot looking. Kind of looks like corn. I picked this fluffy sock up on my recent browsing trip to Five and Below, and of course I put it. I didn't realize that the sock had like these little rubber pieces on here. So, and if you're going to do this and use one of these socks, and they're only $2, you can't really beat that, and they're fluffy and beautiful. I mean, look at the pattern on this thing. They're really snug, so be careful when you're pulling this down, you know, just be mindful. It's going to take a little bit of patience. That was like the most difficult thing about this. I took a piece of jute twine after I cut the top of the sock off, or the booty part or the foot part, like whatever, wherever the toes go, like I cut that off. And then I just kind of tied a little piece of twine around here, used a Sharpie to draw closed eyes because I wasn't trying to get difficult. Eyes can be hard to draw if you're not that great, so I figure most people, if they wanted to recreate this, can do a sleepy eye. And as I'm drawing this one, my other kid comes down to ask for a snack, and she's standing over my shoulder at this current moment just watching me, and here go my girls.
I can think of it.
Oh, it's a snowman.
Very good.
It's a snowman.
You would think y'all would get it a little bit quicker since Christmas is coming, but I'll let that slide. Oh my.
It's a snowman. I'm smarter than Jalen now.
How dare you?
They were having like a serious debate about what I was making behind me, and I'm just like, really? No one knows what this is but me. Oh, I can't imagine what the viewers are going to think. Anyhow, and that's going to be it for this one, people.
This year I'll think about how I'm so lucky to have a place that I can come home to. Yes, I am on my way.
I was lucky enough to have an amazing subscriber send me these giant pine cones. Thank you very much, Terry. She was also sweet enough to clean the suckers out because I was like, oh girl, I don't do bugs. She's like, I got you. Check these out. They were literally bigger than my hand. I had a couple ideas for these, but since we're at the beginning of the season, I'm like, I can use these as little accents as I'm going through to add to decorate. I wanted to create a Christmas tree set. Flocked, of course. And these needed a nice rustic base. And I had these little Dollar Tree cube pieces that I picked up a little while ago, and I thought these would make awesome little bases. I can take some papers and just decoupage them on there, and the theme kind of just goes with the rusticness of the pine cones as it is. I mean, people, let me know in the comments, do you feel like pine cones are rustic? Because I think they're rustic all on their own. Now we're going to need to bring in the decoupage paper. I'm going to use this and some of Hobby Lobby's paper, but there is a particular little spot right here on this TDS Decoupage paper. This is from my TDS Decoupage line. It can be found at thediystruggle.com. I just wanted to take this little section right here and cut it and put a couple little pieces on these dice, mostly because the colors are going to match exactly with this paper that I have had and I love that I pick up from Hobby Lobby. And as you can see here, the two prints complement each other really well. And if you didn't know, you can pick up paper really inexpensively from Hobby Lobby if you have one local to you and you like to craft. I wasn't exactly sure which sections I wanted from the paper, so I cut off several little pieces. For our medium to attach it, I'm going to be using Deco Arts Decoupage in the mat. Of course, use whatever medium you want. Regular Mod Podge would do the trick just fine. I'm putting a healthy amount on here, and then I'm just gently pressing our piece. And no, I did not cut a perfect circle. You're welcome to, but I'm going to sand this off. And for those of you that love the burn method, you want to do that as well, you go right ahead. I just like to sand my pieces, and I feel like it works just fine. So I cut the pieces in a circle, I applied them, and then I let them dry for about 30 minutes. And while they were drying, I took the opportunity to flock our trees using this multi-surface paint. There are many ways to do this, people. You can use your glitter, you could use joint compound, you could use spackling, you could use caulk. If you want more of like the crusty white bits all over the place, I'm like, nobody's gonna see them but me and you. If you're watching my videos, they're gonna be little decorative accents, you know, my displays, and I'm gonna probably pop around for Christmas. So I'm completely content just using some paint for this part. Now it's time to bring in our little finger sander so we can get the excess off around our paper. Please make sure that whenever you go to do this, if you're new to decoupage, it is really important to make sure that is dry. If not, no matter if it's paper, even a thicker piece of paper, or if it's a napkin, if you start sanding too early, it is just going to move and tear it. You have to get a little bit of patience, people. I know it can be rough, but patience is key to making sure that this looks flawless on here once it's sanded. I really loved how the colors from the TDS Decoupage paper complemented the little pieces that I chose from the Hobby Lobby paper, and then took some of Waverly's wax and went around the cube and went, or the dice, and went around our little pieces of paper that we decoupaged on here just to make it all rustic and fabulous. To attach the pine cones to our little base, I'm just using some hot glue. People, don't do as I do, okay? I am out of wood glue, and later on in the video I do find some Gorilla Glue gel, but make sure you're using a glue that is going to hold these suckers onto here, okay? Your girl needs to make a trip to the store, okay? Shocker. I took some little, look how cute these are. These are from Dollar Tree, the little Christmas bells. I glued them onto different little sections on the smaller trees and left the top one blank and put a little star right at the top of that one. And I cannot tell you how much I love these pieces. I always feel so blessed whenever people send me things and want to see what I create with them. I hope I did not disappoint her. Let me know in the comments below if you plan on making any of these for the holiday season. I was a little bit nervous with the idea of building this tumbling tower block Christmas tree because the top is slanted, and I know that the hot glue will hold it in place, but I was worried that the weight of it was going to cause it to tumble back and forth. So we'll get there. I will show you guys what I'm talking about. To start this off, we're going to need a lot of 2x2s. Now for the base, I'm doing, see how the 2x2s, I'm gluing 2x2 together, and you will need 2 sets of these. So it will be 8 total blocks just for the base of our tree. I will tell you, I used almost an entire block of the tumbling tower blocks from Dollar Tree to create this piece. Not the whole thing, but again, you can make this as big as you want. I'm just giving you guys the idea. So after I had these all in their 2x2 little partners, I started gluing on the base. The whole bottom piece that I have right here that you see me gluing it onto, I just had that laying around and I thought this would be perfect for the bottom of this. Use whatever you want. If you want to use tumbling blocks to create a base, do it. So here's where I started with the construction of trying to figure out how to angle this. Now, my girlfriend, Angela Jones, DIY, she has built stuff like this before with tumbling tower blocks, and she will use a little dowel to put in between. So you got like a place to press the tumbling blocks onto and apply a lot of glue. And I'm using this little bit here. And of course, you know, I think I just at this point like seeing where the pieces end up once I chop them in half. But I'm loading up the center right here with the glue, and then we're going to put our little bit right there as our brace, and we're going to start applying the tumbling blocks on the sides and going up to create our tree effect. For the entire thing, I just did 2x2. So each side of our tree here will have 4 tumbling blocks, and I used tacky glue. I know, tacky glue. I usually use wood glue and hot glue, but I had the tacky glue kind of just sitting right next to me, and I'm low on wood glue, and you know, you got to tip it over and then squeeze it out, and I was like, it was just easier to use the tacky glue for this. And I gotta be honest with you, It worked out really flippin' well. I was not disappointed at all. So you can see me hesitating every time I go to put on the next layer because one, I was trying to move the tumbling blocks around so they were not all facing the same exact way. So once I put the stain on here, it would have different variations in the tree. And two, I wanted to make sure that the layers were shorter than the next layer. So if I put it the opposite way, it definitely was not hanging in, it was hanging over, if that makes sense. So it took me a little bit as I went up the tree just to make sure the placement was perfect. In total, this took about 50 tumbling blocks, and I let this sit and dry for about 3 hours before I came back in to do anything to the piece. If you want to stain them beforehand, you go right ahead. I usually come back in and do that afterwards. Now I am spraying this with water. I know you guys are like, what the hell are you doing? Listen, it is a quick and easy way to spread your antique Waverly wax around when you have water. I could have just dunked my brush in the antique Waverly wax and then some water, but spraying it down, a little bit of antique Waverly wax, and then we painted it on up, and it looked like this once it dried. I'm taking a little bit of Waverly's white chalk paint here and just kind of going around the edges to add a little bit of depth and to kind of bring out the tumbling blocks. So it just gives it more of a branch feel for me. You guys don't have to do this step if you don't want to. Once this dry, I came back in with some little accent pieces. These are just laser cut pieces that I had and some little half a beads and glued them on to the piece in random sections. You could color yours, you could put glitter on yours, or add greenery. Any of that would look good as well. I just wanted to add these and keep it as neutral as possible, and I thought that the laser pieces would pop out having that white in the background. Board is so smooth, and I'm taking 800 grit and going over the entire piece to accomplish that. Your dusty bits are off there. Use a microfiber cloth, your leaf blower, whatever you got on hand. I'm no one to judge. I use it all. And here I'm just kind of sitting them next to each other. Since I'm creating a painted set, I want to make sure that the pieces of wood are going the exact same way. So I'm going to leave the live edge piece facing the center, so it looks like both these pieces are kind of facing each other once we paint them on our boards. On one board, we're going to paint a tree, and then on the other board, we're going to paint a snowman. And we want these kind of looking at each other, so we are going to only paint half of each. Here I'm sketching half of the Christmas tree, and I'm just putting the edges where I want to make sure I don't paint past. If you guys are not good at drawing or sketching or etching, use a stencil, use your Cricut, paint out some lines, or take some painter's tape and just put an edge there so you don't go beyond that. These ideas are not to discourage you and like, Brandy, I can't paint like that. It is to inspire you to take the idea and create it and make it your own. I know everyone is not able to do exactly certain things that other creators are, but I'm always going to try and give you guys options to be able to recreate exactly what I'm doing. And here I'm just showing you the little outline on the tree that I created. Now the next board, since I want them to also be about the same height, I'm putting them back to back, and I'm going to start the snowman head roughly about where I have the top of the tree. And of course, we're going to start out one smaller, and then if you want to do a big belly and just go all the way down, you go right ahead. I decided to do 3, like most snowmen. You know, they got the little chest area and then their voluptuous little bottom area. And here I'm just showing you that we have that all traced out for me to be able to start our painting. Typical trees are not just one green. You know what I mean, people? They got a little variation. And we're going to do the same thing with ours using these 3 colors. And for our trunk and some accents, I'm going to be using these 3 colors. Even though we're not really going to see it, we're going to start off with the base of our tree. And I'm going to just pull that black and brown that I put on half of the paintbrush, a little bit of black and a little bit of brown, and pull it straight on down to create the base where our roots are. Every single step I make creating both of these painted pieces, I make sure that they're completely dry before I move on to the next, so we do not smear the paint. The trick to creating your own painted pieces that look like you purchased from a store is to make sure that each part of your painted project is exactly what it's meant for. And I know that sounds crazy, but I'm going to try and explain it. So here, for example, I am creating the outskirts, basically like the long pieces of our tree. And I'm using two colors, the very dark and the medium green, to do that. These are our very long sections. We are not going to take our branches any further beyond this point. Now, to save time, because I wanted to break this down as much as possible, I was using, see the heat gun? I was using the heat gun in between here to dry the sections. Again, you want to make sure everything is really dry. I'm now coming in with the really light green and mixing that with the medium green and doing smaller strides. And I'm going in between the gaps that we left with the darker green. This is going to give us the individuality and appearance that our tree is layered and a high-end look. I'm doing my very best to do this in one singular stroke by taking it as far as I want it to go and dragging it right towards the middle of our project. After I dried that section, I then came back in with different color variations and carried on with dragging those lines in between other lines, making some longer and some shorter. Here I've decided to create these wonky looking little branches, and these are really just going to serve as a guide for me as we start our pouncing that gives it a little bit of a 3D effect. One of those sea sponges would be really great for this if you have it. I do not, so I just rolled up a piece of paper towel and then I took a few different colors and started pouncing on our tree. Gently, I didn't get wild with it, and I stayed in the strokes of the tree. And this part is super, super important to make sure that everything else is dry as you go, to make sure that it stays like this. Next, we're going to bring in the sponge. This is just a regular disc sponge. I cut off a little section of it, and we are going to take that really light antique white color, vanilla color, either one would work for this, and we're going to just dab on the ends of our Christmas tree, the far pieces that we have sticking out, to give it an extra added look. Once you're happy with that, pick out your accents and glue them on your tree, and that's going to be it for this one. For our snowman, we're just going to be using these two colors. The gray is to help us give a little bit of that 3D shade look. Starting out, we're just going to take white on our paintbrush, and I'm using an angled brush for this part, and I am going to just create our outline. I do find that whenever I'm doing something circular, it helps give it a more realistic look. If the whole way that you're painting it, you are keeping that circle motion with the paint. Once it's dry, we're going to come in with a little bit of that gray, and we're just going to put it on the very tip of our slanted brush, and then put some of the white on the back of the slanted brush. And then we're just going to really go around our edge here, and we're going to continue with that circular motion. Once your project's completely dry, we're going to draw on our little face. I know I started off camera. I forgot to film it. Sorry. Since we want our little guy looking over at the tree, we're going to create the illusion that his eyes are looking that way. So to do this, we want the back end of the eyes to be slightly flat instead of completely rounded. For our smile, we're keeping it super simple and just using some little dots here. And then to color in the nose, I'm going to use some pumpkin orange color and paint that in. And for the eyes and the mouth, we're going to bring in the Sharpie. You can paint these in if you want as well. I find it easier when you're doing something easy like this and kind of detailed, that Sharpies are a perfect tool for the job. For the accent pieces, I just picked out colors and things that complemented the tree since it's a set, and I simply love these pieces. I want to sell them in my vendor space, but I just do not know if I can part with them. I love them both so much. For this rustic tree decor piece, we're going to take a 1x2 and cut this into 2 different pieces about 6 inches. Then we're going to angle our miter saw at 45 degrees and cut it in the shape of a little house. Look how cute these little guys are. Super cute. So, you know, that's how you can make a house too. Now we're making trees and we're going to nip the sharp edges off of our little house just by drawing a little curve on here. And then we're going to use a vice grip to hold our piece into place and sand these suckers on down. Took me about 10 minutes per piece to do the sanding. We're going to make 3 trees, but the third one, we're going to use a 1x4 and we're going to cut that one slightly different. So we have 2 trees, the same style, and 1 a different style. And here's our little tree once it's all done. I did use 800 grit sandpaper, the same one you see me use in the first project, to really smooth these trees out. If you want more detailed information on how to cut these trees, I did make a tutorial on that. I'll link that down in the description box for you. And here is our third tree. I love this one so much. Now we're going to create an ombre effect on the 2 that are the same style, and we're going to just stain this single one and we're going to put a stencil on this one. To create the ombre effect, I'm using the same antique Waverly wax, and we're going to start at the very top of our trees and bring it on down. We're not going all the way to the bottom. We're going to leave a little bit of a gap here where the neutral wood is, just like this. And then we're going to take our paint and we're going to start at the very bottom and bring it up as well to where the neutral wood meets the antique Waverly wax. Once I had this finished, I waited until they were completely dry to start our next part. For this next part, you're going to need a fairly decent size paintbrush. I'm using one this size. I think it's perfect for this job. And I'm taking a little bit of the antique Waverly wax and doing a nice healthy coat on one side of the brush. And then I am dipping the opposite side in the paint, and then I'm kind of just rubbing it on the plate here to get a nice blend. So this way, when I put it on my wood piece, it is going to be fairly blended on the brush already, and it's going to start giving me that effect on our wood piece. This is now the part where I'm going to tell you, you're also going to need a paintbrush just for your white paint and a paintbrush just for the antique Waverly wax. So once you're using your blend brush, you can come back with both those other brushes and smooth out the more dominant sections of your wood piece and keep that ombre blend right there just as perfect as it is. Now it's time to add on our little stencil to our last little tree. Hey, which one of yous are over there judging my stencil? Listen, I know it's seen better days. It's a little crusty, but it's got some sticky on the back of it. And we don't just go throwing stencils away around here because we don't like to weed out the Cricut machine. Okay? Nobody likes that kind of negativity in their life. So let's move on, okay? I'm just using a regular paintbrush to stipple in these little holes. It's super simple. You can use whatever you want, the makeup sponges, regular sponges, paper towels, just you know, get your stencil on, okay? Super simple. Peel this off, put your sealer on there. And if you want to leave these trees just like this to set around, you go right ahead. But we're not going to stop there. I cut a 1x2 and I beat the board up. I put some dents in it, make it look a little aged. And we're going to use one of my favorite staining techniques to create a colored appearance inside of this wood. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, white acrylic paint would have been better, but I am completely out of white acrylic paint. So I had to use the chalk paint. I like using acrylic paints for this. They just work better. Sometimes the chalk paints leave like a residue when you're trying to do a stain. The sucky thing about this technique is it only looks authentic if you follow the grain all the way around the piece of wood. So it is a little time consuming. It took me roughly an hour to do this to this little piece of wood that we're going to use as our base for our tree decor. I am sure that the piece would have probably looked just as fabulous if we would have just put some antique Waverly wax over it, but I can't do that. Sometimes I'm extra. And in this case, I was picturing this at the center of a table with the wreath around it. And I just really wanted to have something extra popping through whatever you might put around the base of this, just to give it a little extra. Oh my gosh, that looks amazing. Look. Once you have all your colors on there, you can take a piece of sandpaper. I would recommend 120, 150 grit. This is at 80. It was a little bit rougher. I should have known better. It did leave a couple scratches, so I had to take it out and use a 200 grit to just knock off the extra scratches. I love doing it this way because using that stain, it really seeps into the wood. So when you take that extra layer off around the top, it just makes it look very, very natural. Now, I picked this dowel up from Home Depot and at the time did not realize that I didn't have a drill bit the same size. So for staging purposes, so you guys see the end result, I did use hot glue, and I highly discourage that for a final end result with something that you want to last. It will not hold on here. I do plan on going and getting the proper drill bit to put holes in the bottom of the trees and in this little wood piece, so that way I know that it will stay together using wood glue. This is probably one of my favorite Christmas projects I have ever made. I'm absolutely in love with this piece. To create our wall palette star, I'm using a 1x2 and I cut that down into 5 different pieces. I have 3 longer, 2 short, a little bit different, and it beat up the boards minimally, not a whole lot. I'm taking some antique Waverly wax. It's watered down just to change the color on these slightly, but still keeping it pretty neutral. Once they were dry, I placed them face down and then cut these stakes I picked up for $1 from Dollar General. Now, I cut these stakes down and we are going to glue them onto the back of our palette. And we're going to use a nail gun to make sure that these are in here. I could clamp it, wait 24 hours, but I don't have that kind of time. So we are going to just use our nail gun and get this joint put together so we can just move on with this cute little DIY project. It is so flippin' simple. I cannot wait to show you the end of this. Flip your piece over once you have it all together, and then we're going to put 5 points on this, making a star. Now, I just eyeballed this, people. For those of you that need perfection and precision, you do you and get out your little measuring pieces and bits and do what you got to do. I eyeballed it, and then once I was happy with it, I brought in my drill and put screws in the holes that I marked. And I know you're like, Brandy, what are we doing here? Listen, it should look like this. And that's going to be it for this DIY. You take some ribbon, some twine, whatever makes you fuzzy inside, and you create a hanger on this piece. I used some bells as an accent for the top of this. I love this piece. And you can switch out the ribbon all year long. How cute would this look in 4th of July colors? 3 different size wood rounds, and we're going to take this camper napkin and just dissect it. We're going to do this by basically just ripping up little sections we want to put on our round pieces. And to give us a nice clean base for that, I'm just putting a light layer of chalk paint on here, letting it dry. And I did kind of dry brush around the edges just to make it look like that white is blending into our wood. So once we get our napkin on there, it just all looks cohesive. And of course, if you want to, once you get this on here, you can take a little bit of white paint and dry brush around the napkin as well to make it look like it's more blended in. It's completely up to you. If you want to, you can even drill a hole in these to put your hanger on it. I actually just stapled some twine onto the back of these. And if you have a napkin piece like with this one, it's a little too wide. So to get it to actually set in there, I'm carefully ripping off a little bit of it. And then we're going to just use our medium to attach the pieces. And we're going to make it look like one. Now for this, I will say it is super, super, super quick. So just use a little bit of Mod Podge, tappity tap tap that napkin on there. And then just paint right over it. I wouldn't even wait for it to dry, to be honest with you, because it's so tiny and it's already wet. But you can see here how I'm just using the little tears and making sure they meet up so it still looks like it's all one. You never know that there is a little rip in there. And that's going to be it for these. These metal. I've picked up some of them and I wish I picked up more of them. Keeping this DIY super simple, I just used some glue to attach, which I'm sure you guys have seen this done many times, to have the little candlestick glued to the bottom. And then I'm just taking some Rust-Oleum 2x white spray paint. This is just a little greenery piece that I had laying around that I just spun into a circle, and I'm putting in here to give it like a farmhouse style rustic look with a little acorn. And this check out this adorable book Christmas tree ornament that has inspired me to run to Dollar Tree, check out their books section, and then I spent a good 30 minutes or more finding books to stack on top of each other to create my own book Christmas tree to share with you all. Oh, it's the perfect size, but I put it back. I wasn't trying to get canceled on YouTube. Instead, I grabbed these, which were roughly the exact same size. And I know I'm gonna have you in the comments saying, how many books did you use? Honestly, I didn't count, and I will count while I'm editing this, so I can tell you in a little bit when we get to the end. I can look at the picture. We need to create a base on these, and I'm going to use DIY's White Swan. If you're interested in this, I'll have it linked down in the description box. Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs has it available in her shop. We're going to give these a nice coverage. I actually used 2 coats on all the books because at the time that I was creating these, people, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with them just yet. I know, if you're not familiar with me, I decoupage in my sleep, so it's a shocker that I wasn't trying to decoupage every single one of these books, but I wasn't. I wanted to give this little tree a bit of, you know, versatility. And the reality of it was, I wasn't spending $20 and $30 on books to create the tree, so I had a minimal amount that I was working with to create our 1 foot tall tree. And a little tip, if I can tell you anything, see these hardcover books, you always have to paint the inside. If you do not create book decor often, you wouldn't know this, but let me tell you a little something. Grab the non-hardcover books, because you don't have to worry about this part. You don't have to worry about covering up whatever design is inside of these hardcovers so it doesn't show through on the sides of your projects. Now, I do like hardcovers if I'm just doing individual book decor pieces, but for something like this was a pain in my bootay and it just stalled the process. because I didn't want to turn to the side of my book tree and then see some floral busyness sticking out where I was just too lazy to cover it up, because you know, sometimes you get too lazy to cover things up when you're crafting. Well, maybe you don't, but I do. Okay, sometimes I do. It took me about an hour to paint all these books, and people, your girl cheated and used a heat gun, okay? And I didn't paint the bottom of none of the books, just the top and the side. So I ended up deciding that I was going to decoupage a couple of these books, and this one in particular was just about the perfect size for this TDS Decoupage Paper piece. And the numbers, you see how it's kind of wrapping around the spine? I thought that would look awesome sticking out on our tree. If you're not familiar with me, I have a decoupage paper line. It's called TDS Decoupage Paper. It's tissue paper, and there are a bunch of designs for you to choose from. The links down in the description box. Check out them at thediystruggle.com. I absolutely love this print, and I'm pretty sad that I end up covering up the woman with another book right on top of it. I know. I love these little Mod Podge brushes I got off Amazon so much. I have been kind of using them for everything. And for our medium, I'm just using some regular Mod Podge and applying on here and going little by little and wrapping this around our book. I found this napkin recently out in my travels, mostly at, Home Goods. I found it at Home Goods. And I thought it would be perfect to tear out some of the words, and they will fit right on the spines of these books, just to give a little something on the tree. A little extra design. If you have never decoupaged with a napkin before, it is a good idea to make sure that you get all the little sneaky layers off your napkin. Just decoupage the top layer. So that's all I'm doing here, is tearing out the section I want and then pulling off those extra layers right on the back. Napkins are super thin and porous, so keep in mind that less is more. Too much Mod Podge or too much medium is going to cause it to tear, especially if you're using such a tiny piece like this. So using a very thin layer of your medium will absolutely help reduce any chances of ruining your napkin as you're decoupaging. When I was happy with the amount of books I tossed some decoupage pieces on, I grabbed some paint, and I mostly stuck with red and green. I needed a base for our tree, and as much as I hated to cover this cute little piece up, I got it on clearance somewhere random, and I'm almost positive I could recreate this Hello Pumpkin sign without a thought. However, I was 1000% sure that I didn't have a piece of square, anything this size to fit my book tree. So sacrifices had to be made. And we're going to use a piece of Hobby Lobby decorative paper, and this stuff is super thick. So I'm going to decoupage it right onto here to give us a base. If you have never decoupaged with thick paper, let me give you a few tips. For this piece in particular, I cut it down to size, and I wasn't worried about edges showing in the center because obviously it doesn't fit. We're going to have that completely covered with the books, so nobody's going to see it. Who's going to know? Who's going to know? Nobody, except for me and you, but you're not going to tell nobody. Do the normal. Apply your Mod Podge, grab you something hard to press your piece down, and then bring in a heat gun. And I've said this before, that whenever you're heating up Mod Podge, it reactivates it. So if it's already dry, it reactivates it. It also creates a tacky texture. So if you're using a lot of Mod Podge in a section with thick paper, think of it like a marshmallow, okay? Marshmallows, they're normally sticky even if you touch them a little bit, right? But if you apply heat, they get really mushy, right? That's how our Mod Podge is. It starts to get mushy, it gets even tackier, and then as it dries, it hardens. But if you applied more heat, it's going to get mushy again. So that's kind of how Mod Podge works. I didn't want to just do the iron-on method here because I felt like this covering was plastic and I wasn't sure what that would look like as I tried to do that method there. We're gonna need to bring in the stapler. Oh yes, we're gonna need to staple down one section of this book onto our piece here to make sure that it's not going anywhere. And you know, we're going to use glue too, but the stapler will make me feel fuzzier inside. And then I just started to kind of build and go. I put down some glue, I added our staples, I put one book at the bottom, and then went with 2 books on each side. And in certain sections, I used these little wood splices to glue to create a stability section where there were some gaps, even though I know that I planned on at the time shoving some floral pieces in there or some garland. And people, there wasn't really no method to this madness. I just layered according to size and according to design as we went. I took some garland that I picked up from Dollar Tree from their plus section and started gluing it around. And please keep in mind, staples, wood glue, or Gorilla Glue gel will absolutely help keep this thing in place so it doesn't fall over on you. I took some ornaments and tiered them up at the top so it gave us more of a point. And I found a little star ornament that I glued to the very tippy top. To need 2 tumbling blocks, lots of 2 tumbling blocks actually. And to create the bonds, we're going to use wood glue and hot glue. I use Tight Bond and I put it inside of a crafter square little glue bottle. I empty out the glue, pour the Tight Bond in there, and it's a nice little, you know, trick to have something small just to get these going when you need just a little smush of the wood glue. Now be mindful because your hot glue is going to kind of ooze out in between your tumbling blocks. However, I found this nifty little tool. I used to use my fingernail, but now I'm using this nifty little tool. If you don't wait until it's fully dry, like it's a little warm still, but it's formed, it comes off so satisfyingly. And you do have a pile of bits like this. We just kind of toss them out. Blech. See our 2x2s over there? We got 2s and 2s and 2s everywhere. Well, it's just easier for me to glue them together, and then I started piecing our rows because we are making a tumbling block star. In case you don't know, I do DIY related browsing on my channel to help you budget and plan and save and get inspired, and found this star at the at-home store on one of my browsing trips, and I felt inspired to recreate it into a tumbling block DIY. We're going to create our center using 10 tumbling blocks for the very middle, 7 for the under part of the middle, and then 6 for the top part over the middle. And then we're just going to use our wood glue and our hot glue to attach those 3 rows together before we start branching off and creating our top and our 2 legs. As you can see here, your bottom row is not going to be evenly on top of the tumbling blocks, and that's fine. Now this row, however, is going to be directly on top of your tumbling blocks, so the tumbling blocks will completely line up. And for those of you that are like, oh, it needs to all, you know, layer the same, listen, you're not going to see it. We're going to cover it with some florals. Okay, calm down. Then we're going to go over with 4 tumbling blocks, 3 tumbling blocks, 2 and 1 for the top of our star. Once you have this put together, we are going to start assembling our 2 legs. This is where we're going to need to make like a little indent. So the next row is only going to have 5 tumbling blocks. And I thought you guys should hear what I have to deal with in the background while I'm trying to build this thing.
Don't hurt your stomach, but you're good. You can survive.
I better get them off of it.
What? We're all hungry. Did you eat breakfast?
Y'all always act like ain't nobody trying to feed yous. Yous have all had like breakfast and snacks. I mean, come on, it's 12 o'clock. Wes was on his way home with pizza for the football game, and my kids are arguing over who's getting the first slice. Anyhow, back to these legs. For the top part of the legs, we're just doing 3 tumbling blocks on each side, and then we're coming down with 2. And then I'm just kind of popping the 2 out slightly, not a full tumbling block length, just slightly, because I wanted them to be in further than the actual like middle part of the star. I didn't want them coming out that far. So take a screenshot right here so you guys can get a good look at it. And then we're gonna spray paint. Once it's all dry, now it's time to put our florals on here. I like to use a little base for my florals. You know, any kind of piece of wood or cardboard would do fine, and load it up with some glue and then just start attacking this. I'm terrible at florals. I do attempt make the best effort possible, but as you can see me struggling here, I'm just kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm gonna stick this on here and pray that it looks nice in the final reveal. And that's it for this one, people. Let me know what you think.
This year I'll think about how I'm so lucky to have a place that I can come home to. Yes, I am on my way. We'll put our differences aside and just enjoy this moment of peace and love and happiness.
How I love me a thrift store, people, and how I love finding little items that will inspire you to make things like these bowls. Do you see what I see? You know you see it. Some ornaments, right? Some ornaments, and you can make these into all kinds of ornaments. But first, we got to get rid of these rusty little hooks that they have attached here. I was like, I should probably be wearing gloves for this. I might end up needing a tetanus shot, and my entire day is going to end up not where I planned it being, if that's the case. It's a good idea before you go to paint anything that you thrift to clean it off with something. And then if you're using a chemical, always go over it with some hot water to make sure you get that extra residue off. I decided to go with a blue for this, and I honestly mixed a couple colors up and made sure that I had chalk paint mixed in there with it to get the tone of blue that I was looking for. Obviously, if you find something at the thrift store that reminds you of ornaments and you want to paint it whatever color you want. This is just what I was going with for these. I love how it dried. For the inside of our little ornaments, I wanted to put some bells in here, and I had just the thing. I picked up these little clay molds recently off of Amazon, and they're linked down in my Amazon affiliate link in the description box if you're interested. And I had one of each bell. I'm using my favorite clay. It is also down in the affiliate link to use for the molds. People, and I'm gonna say this real quick, use whatever clay you want, okay? To each their own. This is my favorite clay. I've used several different types of clays, and this works best for me. I have hand grip strength issues. I also do furniture art. This sands down really well, and it just works for all the things that I use it for. So to each their own, tomato, tomato. I just want to let you know in case you come in the comments and you're like, this works better. I am sure if that's what's great for you, and I appreciate that, but this is not my first rodeo with clay. I've tested them out. This is what I like to use. And normally, people, I also use wood glue for this. Use wood glue. But I'm out, so I'm using this Gorilla Glue gel. You just gotta wing it sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Use what you got accessible to you. And this is what I had. And it stuck on there just fine. You know what I mean? Especially once it dried. Them little clay pieces are on there like a gem. Once everything dried, I took some of Dixie Belle's gilding wax and put a little bit on my finger and went around the edges of our ornaments here, the little bowls, and around our little clay piece. And for this particular craft, I'm going to take these ceramic wall decor pieces that Dollar Tree has, and they're fairly big. and just apply a circular stencil over to the top of them. I have a lot of people ask for easier crafts, so I'm going to make the effort to try to incorporate that more so. I feel personally stencils are really easy, and they're also a great way to elevate even the simplest of Dollar Tree pieces. Even though I have some of you that say they struggle with stencils, maybe together as we're going along and I'm doing different ones, you will get the courage to try this a little bit more. People, thank you all so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed these Christmas crafts, and until next time, bye. This is a nice chunk of 2x6. Look at this chunky house. Anyhow, we are going to just give this a nice coat of Waverly chalk paint, or any chalk paint will do. It usually just needs one coat with a chalk paint. And we're going to grab some stamps for this project. Any stamps will do. Got these off Amazon, fairly inexpensive. What I personally liked about this stamp set is I had a little bit of everything. I had some words, I had some snowflakes, I had a little deer on here. And I don't know where my stamper piece is. I know I own one somewhere that, you know, you put the stamps on. So I'm just using this other stamp for the meantime. Sometimes you got to wing it, people. What do I keep telling you? We're going to get there. Okay, we're going to get there. With or without that stamper piece. See, we got the little deer down. Now I am taking the Merry Christmas one, stamping it on up on the little ink pad, and then pressing it in the top corner. And then I also pop some little snowflakes on here as well. Just a really nice little bundle of stamps, some versatility. And then I decided to distress it using the ink pad itself. And I love how gorgeous this turned out. Ornaments next, and these are really rough too. We're gonna paint these. I'm gonna give these a nice layer of white paint. Oh my gosh, there's a tag on it, Brandy. It would help if you remove that. Ooh, look at that buttery deliciousness. I love fresh paint. It don't look like that for long, my friends. It don't look like that for long, but I love it. Little dippy dip. And let's just get some paint on here. For the little rounds, we are going all in on these tiny little angels right here. And I'm just going to make sure we get our design out. Since we have 3 of these, I also took out this little background. I thought it would look nice with these as well. And we're gonna grab our liquid patina. And in case I don't remember if I said it when I started, people use whatever medium you want. I am using this for the first time today to give y'all my opinion on it. And I've had so many people tell me I should be using this stuff. So I'm super happy to have it available. And if you guys are interested in it after watching this, like I said, the link is down in the description box. You guys can grab this from Unicorn Dust Designs. Her link is down there. But please keep in mind, Mod Podge works just fine. I've totally been using Mod Podge or Deco Arts Decoupage. I love that stuff too. I've been using that for a while as well. For these beautiful pieces, we're going to need to find the holes. Get your minds out of the gutter, okay? I know where your heads were at with that one. We're going to poke a little, so this way we can see where we're going to put our ornament pieces. And if you thought I was going to put anything else on here but antique wax, you don't know me very well. I'm just kidding. So I love rustic things, and you can obviously use whatever you want to rustic these up. But if you take just a smidge on your finger, It goes such a long way, and you just be gentle. My fingers are already dirty enough, so for those of you that are like, oh my gosh, listen, just pile it on there. We're crafting. We're not supposed to be clean. Two different ideas for coasters. We're going to do two different sets of two. To seal over them so we don't see this pattern on the back, I'm going to just take some of this white chalk and cover over it to get us a nice base, and I'm going to do that off camera. People, I decided that the mat for me, it looks nice and everything, but I'm putting these on coasters, and I'm going to finish these with the dishwasher safe Mod Podge. So I'm going to actually use this multi-surface satin to give me a little bit of a sheen, and then the final result's going to be glossy anyway. So I'm just going to switch. I got like first layer here. We're going to pop this on. And this is the dishwasher safe Mod Podge. I do plan on actually using these coasters, so I want to make sure that if I want to wipe them off or they get coffee on them, because I'm going to set them at my desk, this way I have something that's going to protect them. And feel free to just tear your design if you want to. If you don't want to use any water, I'm just happening to use water, so I make sure that I go around the other little designs and don't mess those up. And people, if you are new to me, hi. I like to use a fan brush to apply things whenever I'm working with tissue paper or napkins. It's super thin, and it actually gets in up against, like how I'm folding here. It pushes in extremely well where you have that connection and allows you a really seamless application. It's just, I talk about this a lot in my decoupage videos for those of you that are just coming in and you're like, why is she using a fan brush? It's just a it's a peppermint. You guys do what you want. No, it's a preference. You guys can happily use whatever application, method you want. I just really like using fan brush. Since I'm sealing over the coaster anyway, I'm not really worried about having extra anywhere. Now this one I'm going to have to slant a smidge to make sure that this design is on here. It don't need to be perfect. I just want, all right, listen, we're just going to put it all over the whole thing. Okay, we're going to be rebels here. Let's not cut her head off. There we go. And if you want to use some cling wrap to smooth this out, you go right ahead. I'm just using my finger and tapping and pulling and smooshing, and it's going on here, no problem. That's another reason I love this tissue paper. It is so easy to work with. I also do not like, unless it's really tiny sections, I don't like putting anything on top of this right away. I like to let it dry and then come back and seal over it, or like get the edges off that kind of popped out. So I'm gonna just let this dry and let's move on to our next one. Here are the two little designs we're gonna be using. Super cute. Now these are gonna be a little oversized. What is this? They're gonna be a little oversized for our piece, and that's fine. We're just gonna fit them on here however we can. Not a big deal. And depending on what it looks like, I might go around the edges with some brown to blend out that white, because I'm not so worried about the white necessarily blending in more so than I am the background of the design that we have here. So I'm gonna just put the Mod Podge all over the whole piece and then just plop it down. Here goes our second one. And again, I'm just putting a thin layer of Mod Podge all over the whole towel, all the way to the ends. The cool thing about this is it's a small piece, and the tissue paper is actually slightly forgiving. It's not like a napkin, so you can pull it up if you need to, where if you put the napkin down, that sucker is done. You are not pulling that up without issues. You feel me? All right. Oh, this is going to go... This is going to fit with the flower. Oh, I'm excited about this one. I'm going to let both of these dry just a little bit, and then I'm going to take some paint and touch up around the edges. These ones are dry, so we're going to touch these up, and you can obviously, you know, get your edges off however you want. These are just breaking. It's not a big deal. Sand them. If you want to sand them, use your burn method if you want to use burn method. But yeah. And now I'm going to just take some Mod Podge. Actually, you know what? This is going to bother me because you can slightly, it's not real noticeable, but you can slightly see where the decoupage paper ends. So I'm going to take some of our multi-surface satin and I'm going to just kind of blend in around the edges here so they look seamless. If you've never actually done this before, a good rule of thumb is to not just go in a swoop motion. You'll have a line and you'll still see a division. So you onload and offload your brush just a little bit and then make sure that there's not a ton of paint. And since your background of your towel is white and we're using the same exact color and the background of our decoupage paper is also white, we can tap, 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 pulling the background into our decoupage paper. You can do this with a napkin as well or regular paper. I've done it with all of it. And I've done it on furniture pieces too. Looks beautiful on furniture pieces, especially on like tabletops and stuff like that, because then you really can't tell where one starts and one stops. But it's always good to blend the background color in. So sometimes you want to have different colors in the background, but the white makes it pop. So when you get to the point where you're putting this around where your design is, you want to make sure that the white is dominantly where the design is. And as long as you're bringing the same color in, it's hard to differentiate where your paper is and where the background stops. So I'm just tappity tap tap tapping all along the edge. This way we don't have a sharp edge with the paint. And just popping it on here. I'm going to let this dry a couple minutes and then we will seal over these. I decided to do the same exact thing with these coasters right here and took some brown and a little bit of Waverly's antique wax and go around the edges. I absolutely love these coasters, people. Let me know in the comments below if you plan on making coasters this holiday season. I waited till the next day to film like me sitting here, so this way this did dry overnight, and I just made this coffee right before I sat down to start filming this, so it is fairly warm in case anyone is wondering how this is holding up. But so you feel fuzzy inside and I feel fuzzy inside, you know, I would definitely recommend letting this cure a couple weeks. But, you know, for today, I thought it would be cute to have a little coffee mug sitting on there. And it's not hot or anything, and it doesn't feel like it's sticking. So I'm pretty happy with it 24 hours in. Next up, our snowman. For the 3 snowmen, we're going to take this design and we're going to put different sections of it on the snowman. And it's going to be a very delicate process, my friends, because we want to make sure that we leave enough of the design on there to make it look like a set, and we don't want to have these sharp edges, so this way it doesn't blend in. This is going to take some finagling, but we are going to get this on here. So first thing I'm going to start with this one, put us Once they dried, I sealed over them with some more liquid patina and then went around the edges with some black paint. Little house set, we're going to need one small house and one large house. Both are 1 inch in thickness, so it makes sense to use these as a set. However, we're going to create 2 entirely different designs, starting with some Mod Podge on this larger piece to get a nice healthy layer of it to create an iron-on method with some decoupage paper. Normally, you want to create a base so your design pops through on the paper. Painting it white is a good rule of thumb, but if your background on your paper or your napkin, whatever you're ironing on, is brown, you can get away with leaving your wood neutral. This tends to take a little bit to dry, so we're going to push that house to the side and work on our tiny baby house using a little snowflake from this mold with my favorite clay, this creative paper clay. And people, when it comes to clay, to each their own. Everybody has their favorites. I've tried several different kinds. I struggle with hand grip strength issues, and this stuff is just super easy to mold and it never gives me a problem. So I love using this stuff. It also sands up really well. So if you're using this with furniture and you want to sand down pieces around corners, it sands beautifully. I was really impressed with the detail when this popped out. I knew that these were pretty little molds and really inexpensive off Amazon, but I was super happy with the detail once they came out. I took a little bit of wood glue and put a little circle right in the center and just gently smooshed our little snowflake on here. Now it's time to bring in our decoupage paper. This is Holiday Spirit from my TDS Decoupage paper line that can be found at thediystruggle.com. These are 17 by 23 inches, and this particular design has several options for you to choose from. This is created with tissue paper, so you can take a little bit of water on a paintbrush to get some really exact tears, or you can just rip it by hand. It is tad bit thicker than a napkin, super easy to work with. Since I know I'm going to be sanding off any extra around the house, I'm just taking scissors and cutting out our little rectangle here, and then I am placing it exactly where I want it on the house. And people, feel free to decoupage whatever you want on here, take the idea and remix it to what works for you. I just really wanted to use this design. Now we're going to need to bring in the parchment paper and tear us off a little piece so we can put this over the TDS Decoupage paper. Now you're going to need to bring in the iron, and whatever iron you want will work for this. It has not been my experience that you need to have high temperatures just to do a simple iron on method, unless you're using cling wrap and fabric. We're not going to get into that. I also want to let y'all know, for those of you that I get comments from talking about small irons and not wanting to pay for the Cricut mini iron, Walmart has a really small option for about 10 bucks. When you remove the parchment paper, check your ironing job. It should all be nice and snug on here. Everything should be tough when you're pulling it. If it comes off at all, plop that parchment paper right back down on there and get your iron one just for a little bit longer. Take a sander and go around the edges. If you want to be wild and do the burn method, you do you. This works best for me, and it comes off easily. And the best part is, with this, when you leave your wood neutral and it has a tan background, it looks like butter. It is beautiful. There's no wrinkles. It is flawless. You cannot tell where the paper ends and where the wood begins. Usually the clay takes some time to dry, but I get impatient, and for little tiny pieces, don't tell nobody, I take the heat gun to it and it dries up fairly quickly. I took some red to match our decoupage paper and carefully painted up our little snowflake, added a little bit of gold gilding wax to bring out those details, and I cannot tell you how much I love this set. We're going to do here, I actually got 2 different ideas for these, is to make a puzzle piece and a tag set. So this way we'll have 2 pieces dangling on one ornament. I want to use her. I love her. She's one of my favorite pieces, actually. I want to use her. Not sure how I want to use her. but I want to use her one here. I might have her sit on there like that. And since we have little music ornaments on the puzzle piece, we're just gonna take some of the extra little music ornament pieces and put right on here. So this way it's like a little set. Here's our last one. It's the camper. I love the little camper. Super cute. Build, we're gonna need a lot of 2x2s, and I just used a paintbrush with a little bit of wood glue and some hot glue. This way we had a long hold and an instant hold, so I could just keep going. I'm gonna be completely candid and say this might be the last tumbling tower block DIY that I ever make. It was very tedious, and in total took me over 5 hours between the build and the painting and the details. I also let it set for 24 hours to completely dry. So this ain't gonna be no easy peasy craft, okay? This is gonna be time consuming, tedious, and you're gonna need a little bit of patience. So I love y'all. Here we go. For our top hat, you're gonna need a total of 8 blocks, and you're just gonna glue them up together, set them off to the side, and then start creating our face. Again, another 8 blocks. However, we're going to just put them sideways. So we got our top hat, we got our face. Then push them to the side. We're going to make our body using 2 sets of 5 tumbling blocks for a total of 10. Glue them together and then put them the opposite way of the face. So we got our top hat, our face, and our body. So now we need some arms, right? So grab you 4 tumbling blocks. We need 2 for each side, and then we're going to put them on their side. Now it's time to make our bootay, and we're going to need 4 tumbling blocks just like this. And this way he has a nice little round rump to sit on because he is a shelf sitter. In case you did not know, he is a nutcracker shelf sitter, okay? So we need to make sure he had a nice bootay and some legs. This is the top part of our legs. They're going to be constructed together just like this. And then here's like where the knees are. You know what I'm saying? Like we're bending here. So we're going to need a total of 4. So this way our, you know, the bottom parts of our legs are pretty long. You know, they're pretty long. And now it's just time to really construct everything together using wood glue and hot glue. And don't forget the feet, people. I did use some tumbling blocks to make feet. I put 2 little tumbling blocks next to each other, and I did leave a little hanging in the back for the heel. Now we just really have to put everything together, and I used the same, you know, wood glue and hot glue. And people, in case you're wondering and you want to ask me in the comments, do yourself a favor, don't, because I will ignore you if you ask me how many total tumbling blocks did I use to make this. I don't know. This crap. Oh my god, it turned out really cute and I love it, but no, I won't be constructing anything like this ever again out of tumbling blocks. Oh, and I did pop a neck in there. I did pop a neck. Please bear with me with the whole build. I didn't have no blueprints as I was going about this, and that's another reason it took me so long to get the build, because I didn't know exactly how I was going to make this. So there is a lot of footage that I didn't even pop in here from stuff that I was gluing together, and it just didn't work. So once I got the build down, I then was able to just kind of give you guys the really edited version to get the nutcracker body. This thing was looking a little flat to me, so I did take 4 tumbling blocks and pop right here on the chest. So once we have our design and painted, the jacket will pop out just a bit. I wanted our arms to stick out a little bit, so we needed to make some shoulders. I had these little blocks that I picked up from Dollar Tree and used these, again, applying some wood glue and hot glue, and then did glue them just a smidge higher than what I had the tumbling blocks. This way it looked like we had some shoulders going on, and I will tell you, these were really frustrating. I had to go over these several times, adding more wood glue and hot glue. They kept detaching. So there's probably a better way to attach shoulders. However, at the time, this is what I had accessible to me, and this was the idea and the look I was going for. But just a heads up, if you go to recreate this, it will be the most frustrating piece. When I had these attached, I then just grabbed the arms and placed them right on to these. Now, what I would recommend that I would do differently is at this point, I would just quit. I would quit and then take wood glue and put it all over those arm joints and let it dry overnight before continuing to glue the rest of your project. Or I would glue the rest of the project and then do the arms last and then let it dry. But either way, they kept getting a little wiggly as I was attaching everything else. And then as I was going, you'll see here, I am like, okay, let me add some glue in here. And then I started to take some of the wood glue and paint all along the back because I was getting nervous because of the arms kind of popping out a bit. I wanted to make sure that I was putting braces to ensure that this was not going to fall apart. And I'm sure as many of you know who do create tumbling tower block crafts, it can be so sad when you spend time building it, and then if it's not put together properly, a piece falls off or later or something and it happens. So I wanted to make sure as I was sharing this with all of you that I'm letting you know the issues that I'm having and what I would do to fix it. So if you go to make this at home, yours is definitely sturdier and you won't have any issues. However, mine's doing pretty good at sitting next to me right now. But the build itself was very frustrating because everything was newly glued. And trust, when I had this completely put together, I went over the entire thing with more wood glue to make sure that this was going to hold together. So the next day when I went to paint it and had to put the details on, we did not have any issues. These are the only colors I'm using. And if you don't have the Dixie Belle gold gilding wax, just use some gold paint, or you could also use that rub and buff stuff. When I got to this point, I couldn't help but feel like something was missing. And I'm like, you know what? I want to keep this piece kind of a little modern, but he needs a nose. And I found this at Dollar Tree recently, and I thought if I just nip a corner off of one of these little pieces, it was going to give me the perfect size nose that just protruded out. And no, I did not introduce some lighter shears. Look at me, I completely forgot. I'm so sorry. Oh my God. Let's just pretend it never happened, okay? I won't tell nobody if you don't. I had these in my stash, and I'm like, we're going to use the little gold bits to add some accents onto our nutcracker, and this was absolutely tedious as well. Are you shocked? Because you shouldn't be. It was definitely tedious rubbing these little joints on there. They were not sticking as well as I would have liked them to as I'm rubbing, so then I had to keep pressing them on, and then I'm like, please don't break off. Even though I know I constructed this pretty well, but you still got to wonder. I took that gilding wax and then kind of just drew some little accents around where the neck was to make a collar, around the boots to make the top of the boots, and to give him some little shoulder pads. And of course I had to add a little mustache. People, for all the trouble, he sure turned out pretty great.
Jingle bells ringing in my ear. Jingle bell, a sound that's oh so dear. Frosty the Snowman is all around town. Watch out for reindeers are falling down.
For this Scrapwood project, I'm using a 2x6, and as you can tell, I have beat up this board. I beat the board, okay? We want it to look a little worn when we're all done. And for our stain art aspect, I'm using a baby wipe with some red paint, about a tablespoon of paint, and about a half a cup of water. You could use more or less, really just depends on you. And I'm using some green. The green depends on you. Now, in my last video, I did some stain art with these colors, and y'all are a hot mess. You were like, it looks like a watermelon. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to take some deeper green this time just to kind of take the edge off. Okay. So you guys be nice to me. It doesn't look like a watermelon anymore. Now we're taking some of this white chalk paint and we're going to put a nice base right on the front. So we have a nice spot to put our stencils. I spent a hot minute looking through the Cricut design space for the perfect piece to pop on here. I didn't want the everyday little design. I wanted something unique that I feel like I had not really seen before, and found this stunning ornate looking moose. And I was like, whoa, the weeding is going to be a struggle here. But you know what? I'd have weeded this thing 1,000 times. After y'all see the end result on this, it's absolutely stunning. I plopped the Cricut transfer tape down on here and grabbed my design so that way we could put it onto the wood. And I also printed out a little Merry Christmas sign that I thought favored the moose very well. Once I got both pieces on the board, I was like, let's not use paint. Let's grab some of my Dixie Belle gilding wax and we'll do it in the gold. So this way the design pops. And we're not going to do it the way you think we're going to do it. Instead, we're going to actually put the gold all around the pieces. So it kind of makes it look like it's shadowed onto our wood design. Instead of just stenciling on the inside, we're going to stencil on the outside. It's kind of like a reverse stencil. You guys picking up what I'm putting down? If you've never used gilding wax before, this stuff's a little thick. It's like a paste, but you know, be mindful. Okay. Be mindful. That's all I'm going to say. You could absolutely use regular paint to do this as well. It will still turn out very gorgeous. Just make sure you're getting in all those little crevices. I decided to wrap some ribbon around this and pop a little gold flower. This is absolutely stunning. I love how this turned out so much.
Last year I thought about how
People, we are going to get really artsy fartsy in this house, and I'm going to go over a couple techniques with you so you can recreate this piece at home, or, you know, something like it, or use the techniques to create something you want. First, we're going to need to create a base. You can pick whatever color you want. I'm choosing to use black and I'm doing it with a chalk paint. I'm spraying a little bit of water here just to be able to thin out our chalk paint. Chalk paint can be clumpy and water can help, one, the paint go longer, and two, it should just apply really smooth. Plus, I like that sometimes it leaves a little bit of that wood grain show through. Now you're going to need some Crackle. Have you used this before? It's amazing if you haven't. It's also in my Amazon affiliate down in the description box. I love this stuff. Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Design put me onto this a hot minute ago. I have been using it ever since. A couple little tips and things to know when you're working with this medium. It's super thin. It's not forgiving. So be purposeful with your placement. I plan on decoupaging iron-on method napkin right in the center of this. So I know I'm going to need to paint it white. I am making sure to not put any of the Crackle in the very center. Let this dry completely. You don't want to start going over this with paint before it's dry. Now, since I'm decoupaging the center, I want the design on my napkin to pop through. So I am putting one layer on the center in white before I cover the entire house. This way the center will have 2 layers of white. You only get 1 layer with the outside because you, for some odd reason, cannot go over the Crackle more than once. And it's going to look weird at first. You're going to be like, oh, there's paint stripes. Trust me, once the Crackle starts taking effect, it's not going to matter. You're not going to care. It looks scary, especially when you're doing furniture pieces, but the crackling almost starts immediately. and you can take a heat gun to make it more dramatic as it's drying. You can see right here, I haven't even started the whole house, and where we started, it's already starting to crackle up just a little bit. I give you a better view in just a second, but a tip I do want to share that I think is a good one to try out is to load your brush up and just go up in stripes. Put a decent amount of paint and just pull it all the way up. And like I said, it's not going to matter. Right now you can see the individual brush strokes, but once the crackle starts really taking effect, everything's just going to blend together seamlessly. Since I'm ironing on a very thin white background napkin with a very, very light design, it was important to not have that crackle on the center so it didn't pop through the napkin. If you go to iron on a napkin with something like this, make sure that your crackle and paint is all dried up. And look at that, people. Look how stunning that is. I love the way that looks. But you're gonna make sure that this is all dry, okay? Before you apply your Mod Podge. Here's our beautiful napkin, and I'm going to just take and tear out this design. The cool thing about this particular napkin is it's on each one of the little squares. So you really get 4 little designs, 4 opportunities to use this. And for those interested, yes, this particular napkin is in my Christmas bundle on my website. You can use water on a paintbrush to tear it if you want. I knew I wasn't getting too specific here, so I just tore it all up with my hands. And then you need to get those sneaky layers off of the decorative layer. We're just going to be working with the top decorative layer. You'll be able to see your hand through it. It's so thin. If you do your job when you're creating a piece like this, especially when you got that crackle on there, you're not going to be able to see where this napkin ends and where the paint starts. So it's important to go around the design where it's going to blend in with that paint and the crackle. So to get a more detailed edge, I am just taking a little bit of water on a tiny, tiny little paintbrush and curving it into where that crackle starts. So once we get that napkin ironed on here, it's going to look absolutely seamless. Take your Mod Podge and put a nice, thick, healthy layer on here all the way out to the edge. Just cover the entire piece. And I say this because if you don't, you're going to be able to see where the Mod Podge wasn't, and it'd be uneven once you put it on over as a sealer. Once it's all dry, it's time to get your iron on. So grab you some parchment paper and lay it gingerly over top of your napkin, and then grab your iron and go over this. Couple minutes, well, really, it only takes a couple seconds. But if you're anything like me, you might do it for 2 or 3 minutes. And people, look how flippin' flawless this application is. You cannot tell where the napkin ends. It's stunning. I have done the iron-on method so many times, people. But when you're using the crackle, for whatever reason, the napkin just blends so stunningly into that medium, and you cannot tell that this is not one piece. This candy cane is a big bama, so I knew I was going to need a support system like this piece of cardboard that is 19 by 13 inches. And of course, let's not forget the tumbling tower block. Now people, if I'm being 100 with you, I scoured the internet to see if I could find something that I could even mimic for a build for this candy cane, and I found nothing. With that being said, I will spare you all the footage that I went through trying to find a build that would make sense for this candy cane, and came up with this one. And even once I was satisfied with how I was creating the stem here, when I got to the tippy top, I still, it had its struggles. And at this point, I was already like, well, we might as well open another box because I don't see an end in sight here at the current moment. And here's where we landed, minus the 2 little square nubs you see in the corner up there. I didn't end up using them. And then I decided to get a little professional on y'all and bring in my little white chalk marker and let y'all know how many tumbling blocks I used in the sections. So if anybody wants to recreate this joint, you have exact numbers, which, you know, absorb this, people, because it's not something I always typically take time to do, okay? So it's 27 in the total center of the length of our stem here, and then 9 on each side of the stem, giving you a total of 18. Look at my little arrows I'm drawing for you. Our little hook piece has 6, and then on each side is 2, giving you a total of 10 blocks just to create our little hook. And then the actual bridge from one side to the next has a total of 9. And then I put 1 on the outside of each. People go about this whatever way you want. I'm showing you how I did it. And I decided to take a pencil and trace the candy cane. And then I cut it down to size to meet the trace. I decided to still use my favorite type on wood glue and some hot glue to attach the pieces. Only I smeared the wood glue on the cardboard and left some gaps so this way I could put the hot glue in between, ensuring that we're going to have a long hold and a quick hold so I can just keep attaching the tumbling blocks. I also made sure that as I was stacking these on top of one another that I was stopping to lift the candy cane up to make sure that they were all holding, and it was still straight. Nothing would have pissed me off more than I got all the way to the top and realized that everything was completely lopsided. When I got to the top, I could have just went straight up and then went over, but I wanted to just leave a little space. And again, you create this how you want. I was building this with my own imagination, so it made sense to me the way that I was putting it together. And I love the end result anyway, so I'm really happy with how it's constructed. I did not feel fuzzy inside at all trying to create something this big and not have a brace for it. Absolutely, you could do this without the cardboard. I just did not want to take a chance on everything just eventually falling apart, even though we still had these struggles. Because I didn't put wood glue and hot glue in between the actual blocks and just mostly put it on the cardboard, I did have some issues with the cardboard bending. So to save more time and struggle of that happening later after the project was finished, I just took a minute with a paintbrush and went in between every little section that I could and smushed as much wood glue in there as I could. I let this dry for a couple hours and then came back in with an X-Acto knife and trimmed any excess that was dangling over the cardboard from around our towering tumbling blocks. Because the piece is almost 2 feet long, I thought it would be in our best interest to pop some paint sticks on the back of this joint for some extra stability. And I used the wood glue and the hot glue, just going in like a straight section throughout the middle, and including our little walkway and the hook on the opposite side. The little walkway to the opposite side of the candy cane. And I'm pretty happy with the build. It's not flimsy at all now that it's all dried up. It's been a couple days and it's doing really well. Obviously, paint your candy cane whatever color you want, people. I'm going with the good old traditional red and whites, and I'm using Waverly's white chalk paints, giving it nice coat. And I only had to do 1 coat. It went on really well, and then I dried it on up. Now I'm taking the painter's tape and starting with our hook. And the reason why I decided to start on this side is because I was nervous that if I started on the longer side with our 2 red mixed paints, I'm taking 2 of these to mix together to get 1 color, just because I didn't think it would turn out the way I want it if I just use one or the other. That's just how my creative brain works, okay? You paint yours whatever color red you want. Okay, maybe you just got 1 color. I'm using 2. Anyhow, back to why I'm putting the painter's tape on the way that I am at the end of the hook. I was scared that if I came up the long ends, that by the time we got to the short ends, I wouldn't have my stripes going in a way that made sense across the walkway, you know, from one side of our candy cane to the other. So I decided to start with the small ends and then work our way. And I even like did this stripe kind of slanted to give it the appearance that, you know, it's spinning. Not sure if anybody else, you know, sees the vision here, but in my mind it makes sense. A little help to reduce some bleed through is to make sure that your paintbrush is practically dry, and then start where the painter's tape is doing little dry circles. You could also paint over the painter's tape with white paint, let that dry, and then come in with your red paint or use Mod Podge. I find that this technique is super quick and really effective. Once that dry paint is all on there, then just go over with some more red paint. Now, people, don't let me perpetrate here. I pretended like I was going to show y'all how I greened this up. However, I did not. I did not really get into it. But I did put, you know, this little metal ribbon around our candy cane here. And I made some greenery and a little ribbon. And it was very tiresome. This was probably the most difficult thing of all of it for me. But I absolutely love how this candy cane turned out. Let me know if you guys plan on making one this season. This Etsy piece you could certainly cut up and create it. However, I grabbed this last year at Five Below and thought it would make the perfect thing to create this dupe with. And it was just $4. Now, truth be told, my friends, I have not been to Five Below searching for this piece this year, so I'm not sure if they still have it. So you might have to build your own. Just kidding. Hopefully they have it. Okay, hopefully they have it. I'm going to recreate this with the intent and sending out the positive vibes that if you want to recreate this at home, Five Below has this waiting for you. This might have been one of the easiest things I've ever had to assemble. And just to make sure that the piece didn't go falling apart, I grabbed some of my Gorilla Glue gel to smoosh right on in between these little sections. You could certainly use wood glue if you had it. I just had this right next to me and thought I was gonna just smoosh a little section in one of the little sides. I did the same thing for the top of the piece, push that to the side, and then grab me some greenery and a couple of these little candy picks that I think I picked up from Hobby Lobby. Don't quote me on that one. I attached everything together with a couple little pieces of wire and glued it to our tree, and this piece turned out so amazing. Let's take one last look at the Etsy piece, and now let's check out mine. This little house is probably one of my favorite pieces I have ever decoupaged, and it's so flippin' simple. First, you're going to take some Mod Podge and just put a nice healthy layer all over the front because we're going to iron our TDS Decoupage paper right on the front of this. Set this to the side and let this dry. I picked these little pieces up at Home Depot. I thought they would look awesome as a little chimney. These are little copper, you know, metal flat shoe thingies, and they're just $2.34. And they fit right on top of these little square dowels perfectly. So you just cut an angle, 31.6 or a 45-degree angle, whatever angle is going to fit your roof that you have cut, and you're going to glue that little flat shoe thingy right to the top. I'm painting this black because I am going to paint the roof black and it matches our little flat shoe thingy. And here is the design that we're going to be ironing on here. I absolutely love this little reindeer piece. This is part of the TDS Decoupage Paper line, and the paper is called "'Tis the Season." People take any of these decoupage ideas and remix them to whatever works for you. Use whatever kind of paper, use whatever kind of napkins you want. This is just what I want it to use to inspire you and give you ideas. I'm taking a little bit of water here on a paintbrush and just pulling off the edges. It is my personal opinion that this blends better than having sharp cut edges. So I'm just going around the edges, kind of fraying it. I want to dingy this up just a bit. So I'm taking a little bit of water with some Antique Waverly wax just on my fingers and going all around the edges of this paper. When I was happy with that, I put this in place right in the center of our house. Grab some parchment paper and brought in the iron. Give this a nice rub with the iron for a minute or two. I like to do like 2 to 3 minutes really just to feel fuzzy inside. Some people might do just a couple seconds. It probably doesn't really take that long, but but I just feel fuzzier inside 2 to 3 minutes. And then I pull up the little piece, check to make sure everything is secured all around the edges. And if it is, I'm on to the next step, which in this case is rubbing some antique Waverly wax all around the entire piece. I painted the roof black, glued on our little chimney top, and stuffed some greenery down in that chimney just to add a little extra something. I love how this piece turned out. It's so rustic. It's absolutely stunning. People, as always, thank y'all so much for hanging out with me today. And until next time, bye! If you enjoyed these Christmas DIYs and are looking for more inspiration, check out this video right here.